Hey, good morning, everyone. It's John back with another anti-guru video. You may notice some differences. John is slimming down, new glasses, I've had my hair cut, yada, yada, yada. And today's video, I'm quite excited about because actually I want to deal with some myths. Today's video comes from Anshul Raja, and his comment on my video where I had some intelligent thoughts about these new permitted development rights, and he asked me to do a video on microflats. What is the best and not the best way of dealing with microflats? Join me in a few minutes where we're going to talk about microflats, the background behind them, and how they work together. I think it's going to be a good one. I hope you find it good too. See you in a minute. Right, so this one in particular deals with something that I've been harping on about for a while, because it deals with a particular love of the gurus, the micro flat, right? When is a microflat not a microflat? When does an HMO become microflats? How does it all play out? How does it work together? Now, Anshul has very kindly posted some questions. I'm going to answer your questions, Anshul. And this is the power of commenting, guys. If you comment, ask me questions. If I think we can weave them into an anti-guru video, and that's exactly what we shall do. But let's answer Anshul's questions and set some context, yeah? So microflats have come about since we had prior approval. They've really come to force since we had prior approval. And that's because the original prior approval right, Class O, Office to Resi, used to be Class J, got changed, had no requirement to meet the national standards. All right, no requirement at all to meet the national standards. Still has no requirement at all to meet the national standards. And that has an effect. That means that a property developer, a property speculator, someone who's involved in the property industry can convert really, really small flats out of a prior approval. I know I've got one approved. I've got many approved, to be fair. I know I've been in some of these. I know how small they are. There are benefits and disbenefits to this. Now, obviously, the biggest benefit to you as a property speculator is you get lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of flats, all right? Heaping amounts of them. The biggest I've ever got approved is 242, and that's been downgraded now. That's downgraded to 158. They're building it out right now, just down the road from my office. The problem with them, though, is that they're really small, and therefore the financing options on them are incredibly limited. You can't get financing anymore for a micro flat on its own. You have to buy it cash, or you have to fund the entire block. And that is the issue with them, is what do you do after the effect? Now, fundamentally, especially for you, Anshul, there are uses that are appropriate for these microflats, and they tend to be the student block. So a big block of student hall, essentially cluster flats or microflats arranged inside a communal living block, works really well. Works really, really nicely. And sometimes councils will even improve them straight out the box as a planning application because they're within the wrapper of something. They're in the wrapper of a hall of residence. The alternative to that in London is the apart hotel. The London plan contains lines within it that says the apart hotel model, which is apartments inside the wrapper of a hotel, is a hotel, C1. Now, that has some benefit because you can then market to serviced accommodation, because it's one of the most perfect explorations of what serviced accommodation is and is not. But there are, again, limits to this. What you certainly can't do is go and just get a planning permission for a 15 square metre flat, contrary to the national standards, contrary to the local plan, contrary to the London plan, and following case law, you'll probably get housing condemning that property. At some point in time, I must do a review on that case in the Land Tribunal, where a local authority in Cambridgeshire, I believe it was, tried to get one of these condemned. Now, in terms of how small you dare go, again, it depends on the end use and it depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing a prior approval and your end user is students, for example, then the smallest I've ever seen that are comfortable are about 25 square meters through a prior approval only and specifically for the student market. The reason why I say 25 square meters is when you start to get smaller than that, when things start to get more compressed than that, you start to struggle really fitting stuff in and making a nice place for that person to live for a period of time. It ends up being a mess. The smaller units also tend to be a lot more compromised. So you end up with pods for ensuite that are really tiny, tiny wee little galley kitchens and a bed that effectively fits the room. It's no better than a bed set. If you have the option of HMO or self-contained microflats, in the main, if you're just converting a house, then I would go HMO over self-contained microflats. And the reason for it, having dealt with appeals on this, is it's very difficult to persuade an inspector to break the national standard just because it's you. And that's the only reason you've got, is just because it's you. Dealt with cases in Portsmouth and Southampton. And in both cases, the inspector said, I hear what you're saying, Mr. McDermott, but don't care. It doesn't hit the national standards because it doesn't hit the binary test. The answer is no, get rid of it. And there are plenty of microflats up and down the country that are closed down through planning and through a planning application because they don't meet the national standards. That's where the gurus are kind of selling people short, because they demonstrate that they've done it historically through a prior approval, and then people just assume that you can just do it, and you can't. In terms of financing microflats and HMOs, they are very different. HMOs, you're financing the block based on a yield basis. Microflats inside a block is a different product. And again, you can't finance a microflat that's under about 30 square meters now. 30 square meters is the sort of bottom end for a conventional mortgage. So have a good chat to a finance broker, a property development finance broker at that, to make sure you are putting yourself on the right product. Council tax works broadly the same way. So council tax for HMOs, up until a certain point, is taxed as one unit. And then when you break into that idea of self-containment, when you start to provide en suites or kitchens or whatever inside your HMO rooms, then you're banded Class A, banded Category A, whatever they call the categories for council tax, and you're individually taxed per room. Same with microflats, you're individually taxed per flat. That's assuming, of course, that you can get planning permission for them. And the trick is getting the planning permission for them. Again, they're incredibly tricky. Your final question, Anshul, came as an addendum, and I think I've gone through all of your questions, but if I haven't, then do comment, please. And if anyone else has got any questions or comments on this subject, which I know is the favorite of the gurus, let's get as many flats as we can, maximize, 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 bollocks. Let's try and do something right by the building. Can they be leased out to councils for social housing? Now, I don't know which councils are open to this, and I don't have any case studies on it, because as planning consultants, we never see the end result. I hardly ever see the end result, Anshul. What we actually do is get the planning permission and hand it off and hope that someone's going to do it properly. However, councils can absolutely take them off your hands. Now, it's likely that it will be emergency housing only. I know there are some property investors looking at this specifically up and down the country. So it's likely it'll be emergency housing only. Have a chat to your local authority. They all have housing lists as long as your arm. Have a chat to your local authority. See what they're minded to take and what they're not minded to take. Now, my final thought on this is there are cases where HMOs blur the line. I know I've got one approved myself, where they blur the line between when is an HMO and when is a microflat. And the idea follows self-containment, right? Does the HMO, or is the HMO a true HMO where they share something inside the building, normally a kitchen or a bathroom? It has to be a kitchen or a bathroom, to be fair. Or are the units fully self-contained where they don't have to share anything at all? That is the key test. So you can get very close to microflats inside the wrapper of an HMO. And as I said, there are other mechanisms inside the wrapper of a hall of residence or inside the wrapper of a hotel. You can get very close to microflats, but you have to have something that's shared. Where we dealt with one in Stoke-on-Trent, we got very close to microflats, but we shared the kitchen. And that was the important feature that was shared in that building. I've seen other cases where they share a bathroom, and that was the important feature that was shared. I hope that answers your question, Anshul, and anyone else's questions on the subject of microflats. It's been interesting for me just looking into the law again on this, because law changes over time, as does everything else. Like, comment, subscribe, comment, please. Anshul's questions got answered as a result of a comment. Please leave comments. I can only try and make this channel better if I know what I'm doing wrong. So please let me know. And I will see you on the next Anti-Guru. Have a good day.